In the long history of Chinese celadon, there is one name that predates the famous Ware of the Song dynasty by several centuries. A Tang dynasty poet once described it this way: "When the autumn wind and dew open the Yue Kilns, they capture the emerald green of 1,000 peaks." That name is Ware, the celadon of eastern Zhejiang. When most people picture Chinese celadon, they might first think of a serene blue-green glaze, or perhaps the pale jade tones prized by collectors for centuries. But long before any of these renowned wares existed, the kiln fires of eastern Zhejiang had already been burning for hundreds of years. The ceramic tradition of Ware reaches back to the proto-celadon of the Shang and Zhou dynasties, more than 3,000 years ago. Even then, these vessels had a relatively hard body covered with a greenish-yellow glaze. But because the processing of raw materials, the control of kiln temperature, and the firing atmosphere was still unstable, the pieces often warped, shed their glaze, or fired unevenly. They had begun to move beyond ordinary earthenware, yet had not fully become the mature porcelain of later ages. It was during the Eastern Han dynasty, around 2,000 years ago, that the potters of eastern Zhejiang gradually mastered a more stable, high-temperature firing. The body became harder and denser. The glaze bonded more firmly to the clay beneath it. Vessels absorbed less water, and firing grew more consistent. Here, one of the most important leaps in the history of Chinese celadon took place. Proto-celadon began its transformation into mature celadon. For this reason, Ware came to be honoured as the mother of celadon. But this phrase does not mean that every later celadon was born from a single Yue Kiln. Ware was never one kiln at all. It was a vast system of celadon production, centered on the region of present-day Shaoxing, Shangyu, Yuyao, Cixi, and Ningbo in Zhejiang, formed by many kiln sites working together. The wooded hills supplied firewood for the kilns. The rivers carried raw materials and finished porcelain, and the harbours near Ningbo sent these celadons to far more distant shores. What makes Ware truly significant is that, very early on, it transformed celadon from an unstable experiment into a mature and dependable porcelain. This porcelain became a vessel for everyday use, an art form praised by scholars, a tribute treasured by the court, and a trade good that crossed the seas. It reached distant lands early. In the monasteries and aristocratic households of 8th and 9th century East Asia, US celadon was already a precious imported object, carried far beyond the region where it was made. Yet although a poet called Ware the emerald of 1,000 peaks, not every piece shows a vivid green. The US celadons we see today range across shades. Some lean yellow, some grey, some approach olive green, and some show a clearer blue-green. This variation does not mean they are not true celadon. As we discussed in the previous chapter, the green of celadon is not one fixed colour in the modern sense. It comes from iron in the glaze, and it is shaped together by the composition of the clay, the thickness of the glaze, the temperature of the kiln, and the atmosphere of the firing. The slightest change in heat or oxygen inside the kiln could shift the final colour. These variations of light and dark, warm and cool, are a record of ancient potters slowly learning to command fire. So to appreciate US celadon, we should not search only for a single standard green. Whether a colour is bright is not the sole measure of a fine Ware piece. What truly deserves attention is whether the glaze and the form complete one another. The glaze of early US celadon was usually not as thick as that of later wares. Its glaze was comparatively thin, and so the contours, turns and ridge lines of the vessel itself stood out more clearly. On the raised areas, the glaze ran thin and the colour grew lighter. In the hollows and the turns, the glaze pooled and the colour deepened. This natural gradient lets light travel across the surface of the vessel. The beauty of US celadon often depends not on a heavy, saturated glaze, but on a precise, clearly defined form beneath a thin one. If some later celadons resemble a mountain wrapped in mist, US celadon is more like a hillside emerging after rain. It does not hide its structure. The body, the lines, and the contours remain plainly visible beneath the glaze. A fine piece of US celadon, even if its colour leans slightly yellow, can still hold a quiet and complete presence, so long as the glaze is even, the form is generous, and the proportions are stable. By contrast, a vessel of the most vivid colour, if its shape is loose and its balance unsteady, is hard to admire for long. The beauty of celadon was never the appreciation of a single hue in isolation. It is an order formed together by glaze, body, line, proportion, and light. Think of how, in the Western tradition, a piece of Greek pottery or a Renaissance bronze is judged, not by the brilliance of its surface alone, but by the harmony of its proportion and line. The same principle guides the eye here. During the Three Kingdoms and the Jin dynasties, the forms of Yue Celadon still carried a rich and lively side. The chicken head ewer we introduced earlier is a representative shape of this period, a chicken's head, a vessel body, and a handle combined into an object that is at once an animal image and a usable thing. The same era produced many elaborate soul jars, their bodies piled with towers, birds, figures, and animals, the maker's imaginings of life, family, and the world beyond death condensed into a single celadon vessel. We will return to these remarkable objects in future videos. With the Tang dynasty, the character of Yue Celadon gradually changed. The complex modelling began to recede. Contours became simpler, bodies more regular, glaze more even. Bowls, dishes, ewers, boxes, and tea vessels became the important products of the Yue Kilns. Celadon entered daily life more deeply. To lift a bowl, to pour from a ewer, to open a box, these most ordinary gestures began to carry beauty of their own. Tang writers described Yue Celadon as like jade and like ice. What they praised was not only the green of the surface. The porcelain was hard, clean, and softly lustrous, beginning to show a refined quality that once belonged only to jade. The flourishing of Tang tea culture raised the standing of Yue ware still further. In his classic of tea, the writer Lu Yu compared the tea bowls of different regions and singled out Yue porcelain for the highest praise. In his view, the green Yue bowl let the colour of the tea appear more harmonious. The bowl is not a passive container for tea. Its colour, its rim, its walls, and its inner space all take part in the experience of drinking. We will explore Lu Yu and the relationship between Tang, Celadon, and tea on their own another time. In the late Tang and the Five Dynasties, Yue Celadon reached its most brilliant stage. The clay was washed more finely, the vessels grew thinner and lighter, the forms more upright, the glazed surfaces more delicate. The most refined and highest ranked class of these Yue Celadons was called Mise, secret colorware. Secret colorware is not a porcelain wholly separate from Yue ware. All secret colorware belongs to the Yue system, but not all Yue Celadon can be called secret color. For a long time, this name existed only in poems and historical records. Then, in 1987, a group of Tang Yue Celadons was excavated from the underground chamber of Famen Temple in Shanxi. On the inventory stele buried with them appeared a clear written record of porcelain secret color. At last, the name in the text was matched to real objects. The octagonal vase unearthed at Famen Temple is one of the most representative among them. Its body is divided into 8 clear facets. Along the ridge lines, the glaze runs thin and the color pales. On the flat faces, the glaze lies thicker and the color deepens. As light moves from one facet to the next, the structure of the vessel reveals itself. This thin layer of glaze does not conceal the 8-sided form, it strengthens its most important feature. Had a heavy glaze, thick enough to blur the edges, been used instead, the distinction between the facets would have weakened, and the crisp form would have lost its power. This is the marriage of glaze and form. No single glaze is inherently superior. What matters is whether it appears on the form that best expresses its own character. Another world-famous work of secret colorware is held today in a museum in Zhejiang, the Five Dynasties Secret Color Lotus Bowl. It is made of 2 parts, a bowl and a stand. The surfaces of both are decorated with lotus petals, opening layer upon layer. But it is not simply a plain bowl carved with a lotus pattern. From the rim, down the belly of the bowl, to the stand beneath, the whole vessel is designed as a single lotus in bloom. The soft glaze eases the sharpness of the carved lines, letting each petal connect naturally to the next. The bowl opens gently above, the stand receives it steadily below. It expresses not only the shape of a lotus, but the quiet, stable, rhythmic force of a lotus as it opens. By this point, Yue Celadon had completed an important change. The rich animal, tower, and figural ornament of the early wares had gradually given way to simpler forms and decoration. A vessel no longer needed to tell a complex story. A single curve, a layer of green glaze, a few lotus petals, these were now enough to form a complete beauty. What Yue ware left to later ages is not merely a certain shade of green. Its deeper significance is that it taught people to see that the beauty of Celadon lies not in glaze colour alone, but in whether glaze and form can complete one another. The whole order formed by colour, light, proportion and shape. This is why a piece of Celadon can move us for so long. Ware carried proto-celadon toward maturity and laid an essential foundation for everything in Chinese celadon that followed. With the Song dynasty, the aesthetics of celadon would enter a new phase. The most familiar name among them is Ware. After the 1,000 emerald peaks of Yue, Ware would carry Chinese celadon to another summit with its tender, restrained sky blue. In the next episode, we will begin with Ware and continue the story of Chinese celadon.